If there was a final boss in the game of fixing the suburbs, it would be this, the Suburban Arterial Road, sometimes known as a stroad. I've got a particularly average example right in front of me here. It's got a couple of lanes in each direction, and it's got a sidewalk on only one side of the street. Intersections are made of raggedy crosswalks that literally lead to nowhere. We've got a mall, some fast food, random light industrial. This could be just about anywhere. I'm guessing that avid geoguessers have already figured out where this is, but for those of us mere mortals, we're looking at Wisconsin Avenue just outside the city limits of Appleton, Wisconsin. How could you make this street better for pedestrians and cyclists? It seems like a lost cause, a place never meant for actual humans to use. But this is salvageable, and it had better be, because if we're gonna fix our cities, it's gotta happen in places like this, where most people live and experience. I'm gonna redesign this street as well as several other streets in the area to show that it can be done after the bike belt. We're gonna look at Appleton, Wisconsin, population about 74,000. I actually lived in Appleton for a couple of years, so I know these streets, but it was 15 years ago, and I'd hoped that the bike infrastructure in the city had improved since I was gone, but I'm sad to say that it really hasn't. I spent far too long revisiting Appleton via Google Street View and really had to dig around to find any bike infrastructure. If we're gonna redesign this, we need two pieces of information. The first one is the width of the street, or more appropriately, the width of the right of way. This is the area the local government actually owns and controls. This is our sandbox. The right-of-way includes the sidewalk and often a foot or two beyond the sidewalk. Sometimes it can be difficult to tell, and you'll have to consult official local government maps, but most of the time you can get a good guess by using Google Maps and the measure distance tool. I think this corridor is about 140 feet wide. Sometimes it changes block to block, but it's usually pretty consistent. The second piece of information we need are the traffic counts, the number of vehicles that pass by this part of the roadway every day. Local governments will often have this. You can just Google your city name and traffic counts. A lot of the times you'll get a map. The map will have numbers on it, and those numbers are the average annual daily traffic. It's basically the average number of cars passing through the corridor at that location in a day. It looks to be around 22,000, which is pretty typical for a street of this size. The great thing about knowing the traffic count is we can determine if the road is overbuilt, meaning that there are too many lanes for the amount of cars that go by there. A 4-lane roadway with turn lanes has a capacity for about 35 to 37,000 vehicles per day. If we wanted to eliminate a lane in each direction, that roadway would have a capacity of about 18 to 21,000 vehicles per day. That number is just under our traffic number, suggesting that we'd have a pretty congested road if we eliminated those lanes. Now, there's a value judgment here. Maybe we don't want the road to have the excess capacity and we're fine with a few car delays. Generally, doing something like that doesn't really build goodwill for future pedestrian and bicycle projects in the community, so we're gonna leave the lanes the way they are. To figure out what will fit while keeping the car lanes, we can use StreetMix. It's a free website. You can go to streetmix.net. It helps you create something called a street section, a diagram that shows how the right-of-way is designed by slicing through the street. You just set the size of the right-of-way, in this case 140 feet, and then get to work. I like to approximate the existing conditions and then start fiddling with a redesign. There aren't any existing bike lanes and only one sidewalk, so we'll have to add them somewhere. This can be an opportunity to add a shared use path. These are basically really wide sidewalks that can accommodate both pedestrians and cyclists. They're great where pedestrian volumes aren't super high, so the chances of conflicts are pretty low. I think we can agree that pedestrian volume is not going to be super high right here. While it looks like you can fit one on the right side of the street, there are power lines overhead, and the poles will be smack in the middle of a wide sidewalk. I think we only have about 12 feet of space maximum in this area to work with, which is about the ideal width of the path, leaving no room for those poles. And moving or undergrounding power lines is incredibly expensive and requires dealing with lots of red tape, so that's out. But what about the other side of the street, the one with the sad little sidewalk? If that sidewalk was expanded, you could get the path in there with only a few alterations to the rest of the roadway. It's basically just a wider sidewalk. Not that expensive in the grand scheme of transportation infrastructure. I'd still put a regular sidewalk back on the other side, if only so this intersection makes sense, but a really nice curb-separated bicycle facility would bump this corridor up from bad to pretty decent. There are a couple of other considerations. There would need to be signage and green paint at intersections and driveways to alert drivers to this new path. And the local authorities might have to invest in a sidewalk plow to keep this clear of snow in the winter. These actually exist, by the way. Maintenance is important and we shouldn't forget it. But now that we're done with one street, let's find another one in the greater Appleton area. How about Memorial Drive? I checked the comprehensive plan and it is indeed categorized as an arterial street. And a quick look at the traffic count map says that the average annual daily traffic is anywhere from 12,000 to 21,000 in the area I'm redesigning. That is at the top end of what we could get away with if we reduced the lanes, but I know that streets with one lane in each direction could do the job, so let's make it happen. This may be our only option because the right-of-way is fairly constrained, only about 60 feet. The street is a perfect candidate for a road diet. That's where we take a street with 2 car lanes in each direction and convert it to 1 car lane in each direction with a 2-way left turn lane in the middle. You can essentially move the same number of cars with 1 fewer lane in each direction because you don't have cars clogging up the left lane waiting to turn left into the driveways along the road. They can wait in the 2-way left turn lane instead. Removing a lane of car traffic gives us room to add some bike lanes. We've got some wide car lanes we can trim down too. We can do an 11-foot center turn lane and 11-foot outside lanes. 10-foot lanes are better for keeping speeds under control, but this is a truck route and those usually need 11 feet. With some space freed up, we can get 6.5-foot bike lanes, which is pretty standard. We could narrow them down to 5 feet and add 1.5-foot concrete curb buffers to further add protection. If this was a busier road, I consider turning this into a 2-way cycle track, but I think that separate protected bike lanes would be fine. Just look at the before and after here. With minimal investment and no real change in car traffic, you end up with a better bicycling experience. And with the sidewalk users farther from cars, it's better for them too. All right, so that redesign was pretty straightforward. Let's go from a narrow street to an absolute beast of a street. College Avenue is Appleton's main street. It's a normal urban street here, but over here it's a 250-foot wide arterial with frontage roads out in the suburbs. This street is an example of one of the benefits of having these ultra-wide streets. It gives you a ton of flexibility in how you can redesign it. The traffic counts are too high to do a lane reduction, but that's no problem. There's just a lot of room to work with. This is like the opposite of the Memorial Drive redesign, where space was at a premium. The corridor doesn't have sidewalks around here, so we can get sidewalks and bike lanes by installing another shared use path, similar to what we did on Wisconsin Avenue. And while lots of roads have them on just one side, we can definitely fit them on both. This is great for people who are going to go from one destination to another on the same side of the street. They don't have to cross a busy, dangerous street twice to take advantage of the path. The path should be closer to the frontage road so people aren't near the fast-moving traffic in the middle lanes. To improve pedestrian and cyclist safety, let's add some trees as a barrier and add pedestrian scale lighting. Now we've got some world-class bike facilities with 30 feet of buffer left on each side. This is good because these buffers do narrow down and eventually disappear, but there's room the whole way for just this path. Now you may be saying to yourself, what about the intersections? 2 shared use paths crossing a street can be a little bit tricky, but there are a couple of ways to deal with this. One, you could treat them essentially like crosswalks. There is 2-way pedestrian traffic on any crosswalk, so when traffic is moving on College Avenue, the walk sign can be on for the paths. The concern is still going to be cars turning right across the cycle track. Signage and green paint can help alert drivers. In more dangerous situations, you can give the cycle tracks their own signal phase. This means giving cars in all directions red lights and having a special signal for the cycle tracks. Bike-only signals already exist and do this, and pedestrian scrambles are based on the same idea. With that, we redesigned 3 streets in a community with very little bicycle infrastructure, and we minimally impacted traffic in the process. I hope that the tools and examples show that this can be done anywhere and inspire you to try it out in your community. This kind of stuff needs to be done, so please go and do it. Hey, so I just wanted to let you know that I'm headed to Japan pretty soon, so expect a summer full of Japan-themed content on the channel. I'm so excited. And when I take trips for the channel like this, I always take with me my Bellroy Transit backpack. I bought this thing 3 years ago, and I think this will be the 3rd continent it's followed me on. Now, this backpack is great because it can fit all of my clothes, toiletries, camera gear, laptop, and more. And I can just stick this in the overhead bin and I'm ready to start exploring a city right when I get off the plane. It's such a great companion. It's so great. I'm such a fan of Bellroy that 6 months after I bought this backpack, I bought this one here as my everyday carry. Now, this backpack has been with me for 2,000 miles on my bike to and from work. It's been through sun, wind, rain, and it still looks great. I bought this backpack because I wanted something that said, yes, I need a backpack, but I want something nicer than my students. I'm a professor and I think this one has a nicer look. So again, these are some of the best backpacks I've ever owned. And when Bellroy reached out to say we wanted to sponsor your channel, I was like, heck yes, I already use your products and I'm so happy with them. They actually didn't start with backpacks, but first started making slim wallets, which is what I would recommend to you if you want to try them out, but don't want to dive into a backpack right away. Bellroy are also just really great at figuring out how to organize the stuff you carry. They make key organizers, cable and tech organizers, pouches, and more. As Bellroy are a certified B Corp, you can be sure they're environmentally and socially responsible too. They invest in the use of recycled materials in a lot of the products they make,
and they use eco and dry tanned leather, which is drastically better for the environment than the status quo. This bag, my everyday carry, is made from recycled water bottles. I'd rather have that plastic supporting my laptop than contaminating the ocean. Now you can get 10% off all Bellroy products by clicking on the link on screen or in the description. Get yourself a sustainable, quality backpack or other product. You're not going to regret it. I'm so glad that they're a channel sponsor, and I can't recommend them enough.